Story 1. My high school girlfriend asked if she could mail some underwear to my house because she couldn't pass off getting mail when her parents collected it. Fine with me, my family is very serious about privacy. However, my neighbor wasn't, and the mailman delivered it to her house. She opened it, not realizing it was addressed to my house. She panicked, not knowing what to do, and brought it to my house. I wasn't home, so my older sister collected it and left it on my bed. When I returned home, all my sister said was, "There's a package on your bed, and we're never speaking of this again." I found it hysterical. My girlfriend, however, was mortified. Story 2. Matched with my cousin on Tinder. I was like, wow, she is hot. Oh my gosh, that's my cousin. While swiping. It all happened so fast. Same thing must have happened to her because we matched. I just messaged her and said we never speak of this, agreed? And she agreed. And we've never spoken about it since. Things are weird around the holidays. We just kind of make eye contact, and then one of us finds a reason to leave the room immediately to go talk to other family members who we have not matched with on Tinder. Story 3. My divorced dad was playing horseshoes in a league with my aunt, my mom's sister. They went together one night when I was about 16. I went to a friend's house to sleep over and didn't think any more of it. Until I got home the next morning and her car was still in the driveway. Innocent and stupid me went into the house expecting my aunt to maybe be crashed on the couch or something. Then I heard the shower running and thought, weird. Maybe she's taking a shower before she leaves. Then I heard my dad's laugh coming from the bathroom with my aunt laughing too. I tiptoed out of the house and went right back to my friend's house completely flabbergasted by what I just walked in on. Story 4. I followed a bunch of weird blogs tags on Tumblr and was scrolling through my feed. I would usually alt-tab in point 0.1 seconds if I was fapping or whatever, but since I wasn't looking at any I didn't bother to hide what I was doing, kept scrolling, then turned around, while still scrolling, to see my mom come in my room to put some laundry in the drawer. Unbeknownst to me, right as she came in the room, on my screen was a huge picture of an horse. I have no idea why it was on the blog, since it was not a blog for horses or horse, and I did not intentionally look for that. But it was right there, in the middle of the screen. If you looked in my direction, there's no way you didn't see it. I don't know if she was looking since she was only in for a second and we didn't really chat or whatever, but I am assuming my mom saw me looking at that and thinks I like horses. I don't like horses, but there's never going to be an opportunity for me to weasel my way out of that situation. Story 5. I had internal bleeding and really low blood pressure. I was in the hospital and instructed to not try to stand or walk since I'd faint. I did not obey that. I went to take a piss, and my girlfriend saw and chased after me. She caught up just in time to throw herself between me and the floor to prevent me from cracking my head open as I fell back unconscious, D out, peeing all over everything on the way down. I awoke with her sandwiched between me and the tile floors, lying in a pool. And that's the moment I realized I should marry that girl. And I did. But that's not the story I tell when someone asks, when did you know she was the one? Story 6. I was about 15, definitely old enough to know better. I was putting spiders and ice cubes on the super hot wood stove because the light and frost effect was interesting. I thought it would be funny to do it with piss. It was not funny. For the uninitiated, what happens is that it vaporizes, and depending on the volume of your bladder, produces a thick and clearly visible dark brown cloud. If you can imagine the smog line in LA, it looks a lot like that. That cloud hugs the ceiling and hangs down about a foot. It doesn't really move because it's water vapor, and it leaves a film on everything it touches. It smells like, well, burnt piss, and you can also taste it. The cloud absolutely does not dissipate before your mother gets home from work. I was sort of a naughty kid anyhow, so she thought I had started a fire with something. In order to avoid a worse punishment, I had to take responsibility. That was the only time I can remember her looking at me with actual hatred. Story 7. This is my friend's story. She smoked a bit in high school, but obviously hid it from her parents. This one time, she came downstairs in the morning to find a joint sitting on the kitchen counter. She knew for sure it wasn't hers, and that she wouldn't be stupid enough to leave one out like that. Her mother soon after walked downstairs and started cleaning up around the kitchen. When she ran into the joint, she paused, locked eyes for a bit with my friend, said, "Oh, and quickly brushed it into her hand and got rid of it. They both pretend it never happened. Story 8. My sister and I thought we had a moment like this, but we spoke of it years later, and we both had a misunderstanding all along. I grew up with two sisters. I was the youngest, then there were 2 years between each of my older sisters. My middle sister and I were closer to each other than we were to the older one. One time, when I was about 15, my mom found a used in the trash. Since my older sister was living away at college at the time, we figured it wasn't hers. So my sister and her boyfriend, who thought she was being a good sibling, thought it was mine and took the blame for it. Don't think she got in much trouble, but she thought she was doing me a favor. It was actually not mine, and I assumed that since she accepted blame for it, then it was her. Nothing more happened. Years later, I was out with my sister and her boyfriend, same one from high school, and she jokingly made a comment trying to get me to do her a favor, like, "It's the least you could do after I took the blame for that them for you that one time." I was so confused and had no idea what she was talking about until she explained the event, and we realized the years-long unspoken event. I guess it must have been my sister who'd been home from college in secret for a while. There was no husband for my mom at the time, so no cheating allegations. We had a good laugh for the rest of the night. I still think it's funny that we both interpreted the event in such different ways for so long. A few people were wondering why my sister would be home from college in secret. This sister did, and still does, a lot of shady things, hide stuff from us, etc. So it wouldn't have surprised me at all if she were home for a quickie and told none of us. People also are saying it's likely my sister was cheating on her boyfriend, but if that were the case, I would think she would have just denied it being hers altogether, and also not brought it up again years later in front of that boyfriend. Story 9. Well, me and the wife were out on the lake fishing. All of a sudden, I felt the rumbling in my gut. I was about to crap my pants. I looked around and noticed we were nowhere near a dock, and there was nobody else on the water. So I looked my wife in the eye and told her I was sorry and loved her very much. I then proceeded to hang my butt over the side of the boat and had the Hershey squirts. It was over quite quickly, thankfully. My wife passed me a few old receipts from her purse so I could use them to wipe. She told me she still loved me, and we kept on fishing. Story 10. I moved into a Gumtree housemate situation. The housemate will be called Scott. I have CF, but never bring it up since I'm a very healthy and lucky person. I move in with Scott without ever mentioning the CF. About 3 months later, I have a really bad dehydration issue. I'm completely body locked. Think severe cramps, but throughout the entire body. I'm full body locked in my bed, in my pants, underwear, with a pile of edibles to my left, a few dirty dishes to my right. On top of that, I've been CF farting for hours. CF farts are paint stripping. I panic and finally decide it's serious enough that I need to go to the hospital. So I text Scott, who is just in the common room on the other side of the wall. I tell him something like, "Hey, I'm having a medical emergency. I can't walk. I can't even get up. Can you come into my room and help?" He was shocked, and he thought I was properly healthy. He comes into my horrible fart cavern, sees how much pain I'm in, and how actually effed I am. He goes into full dad mode, ignores my messy room, ignores the stank, doesn't say a word, picks me up, carries me to his van, throws me in the back so I can stay in the same shape, drives me to the hospital, carries me out, gives me to the nurses. 10 or 12 hours later, I'm finally released. IV drip and hydrated. The nurses and him had talked, and he's there to pick me up. I thank him. He tells me that he's got love for me, then takes me home. I slept for 14 hours. We haven't spoken of it again. He knows how much it meant to me, and I bought him a bottle of whiskey and a bunch of cured swine. To this day, Scott is one of my best friends in this town. I consider him a hero. I could have just locked up and been in pain till I dragged myself to the road and called 999. Love you, Scott. Oh, and he hasn't mentioned it once, because he knows it's really embarrassing for me. It was business as usual the next day. Again, love you, Scott. Story 11. Teenage me, maybe 14. I find out a girl my age wants to me off in my neighborhood. We meet in the woods one night and do the deed. A week later, she posted it on MySpace. That night, I'm outside shooting hoops with my friends, and her father walks over to my house, and I immediately know what's going on. He asks to speak to my parents, and I let him in the house. After the most painful hour of my life, he appears out of the front door and leaves. My parents call me in, and we discuss it, and I cry like a bee from being embarrassed. It's been 15 years, and it has never been brought up again. Story 12. A friend of mine and I were watching a movie on a site called Rabbit. You can all watch movies and browse the net on the same tab. And somehow, we got into an argument over horse dogs being able to kill people. She looked it up online, and we watched a nasty video of a man getting plowed by a horse. Little did we know, a notification went out on our friend list saying, Brent and Anon are watching man get by a horse and die. Come watch with them. I am still ashamed. Story 13. Please don't judge me. One day, about 7 years ago or so, I went hiking with my sisters. It was fun, but exhausting, so I decided to take a shower when we got back home. I was also in the mood for some extra stress relief, so I grabbed my fleshlight and snuck it in with me. I start undressing and notice a little brown spot about halfway down my inner thigh. Upon close inspection, I realize it's a big, fat tick. Oh, crap, I think. This bastard's been stealing my blood for hours, and who knows how many more are on me that I can't even see. I know I can't handle this situation alone, so I do what any sane, rational person would do. I burst out of the bathroom after fumbling with the doorknob, ran straight into the living room where my eldest sister was watching TV, and said, I have a situation that requires your assistance. Except all she heard was, "Buh, help?" So she looks at me confused and then bursts out laughing. That was when I realized I'm standing in the middle of the living room completely naked. I cover my shame and run back to the bathroom to grab a towel. My sister stops laughing enough to come check on me, and I finally manage to put into words that I have a tick and need help removing it, as well as checking for more. My mom hears all the rackets and starts coming out of her room to see what's going on. At the same time, my sister looks me dead in the eye with the kind of face that just screams, "You're a moron," as she quickly and elegantly grabs my fleshlight off the bathroom counter and chucks it into the cabinet under the sink right before my mom turns the corner. She did end up helping get rid of the tick and check for more, obviously trying very hard not to laugh, while I just sat there in silent misery. Afterward, I beg her to never mention this to anyone. I threw my fleshlight away later that week, on garbage day, so nobody else would see it. Story 14. The time I showed my D to my father because I thought it was shrinking. I was 17. At school, I ate something for lunch that didn't sit well with my stomach. Next thing I know, I'm in my classroom hunched over, feeling like my stomach is combusting. I go into the bathroom to find that my has become short and black, with the skin crusty and dry. It felt like it would rip off if you tugged on it even a little. When I got home, I was hysterical because I thought I would lose my or that this was permanent. I decided to swallow my embarrassment and show my dad. We did nothing about it, and eventually the skin went back to normal and my grew back to an almost normal size. However, my is not as long as it used to be, both erect and flaccid. Still, to this day, I have no idea if the food I ate was the cause of it. It was just a slice of pizza. My dad and I have never spoken of that day. Story 15. My brother had an imaginary girlfriend with an imaginary Facebook profile. She would post loving, imaginary messages on his wall. I asked about her a few times, then got a little more persistent. After a while, I got suspicious and did an image search for her photos. They were for another person in another country. Also, no one ever saw the imaginary girlfriend. If someone asked me about her after seeing their loving Facebook exchanges, I would kind of imply that we'd met to spare my brother, and myself, embarrassment. Eventually, he stopped talking about the imaginary girlfriend, and she stopped posting imaginary things. I will never ask what happened to her. I'm pretty sure he will never mention her again either. She's still on Facebook though. Story 16. In middle school, my crush's mom and my mom drove the exact same SUV with similar license plates. After school one day, I ran up, hopped in my mom's car, and started talking when she didn't talk back and hadn't left the pickup line. I looked at her. She was not my mom. I looked to my right, and my crush is standing outside the car looking at me like I was crazy. I sheepishly got out and ran a few cars back to my real mom. A few years later, I had moved back to the area and was a cashier at a local store. My crush came through the line and recognized me and started to say, "Weren't you that girl who—" Where I just interrupted with a yes, handed him his change, and quickly started the next customer. Story 17. When I was 17, a huge photo radar ticket came in for my truck, something like 40 kilometers over the speed limit. My mom was furious at me. "How dare you drive like a maniac? I raised you better," and all that. But it turns out I wasn't the driver that day. Dad had borrowed it to pick something up. I asked him how much it was worth to him for me to take the fall, knowing she would turn on him with the fury of an angry mama bear. And that's how I got myself a new HD TV that year. My dad took my car to the grocery store once while I was in high school. He forgot to unload the beer he bought, so when I drove to school the next day in my SUV, there was a case of beer in the trunk that could be seen from the outside. One of the security guards saw it, and my absurd school administration hauled me in and threatened me with punishment for attempting to distribute alcohol on school grounds. My dad came in with the receipt for the beer and threatened to raise hell if I received any sort of serious punishment, because A, the case was still sealed and no beer had been distributed, and B, it was $60 a case, check beer, and no high schooler is going to be distributing that. The administration did still have me dead to rights on bringing the alcohol on campus, but my dad shouted them down to a 2-page essay about the dangers of alcohol, which he wrote for me, and have to go with a group of fellow students to an elementary school to talk to kids about the dangers of alcohol. Ironically, the group was solely composed of kids who had been busted for drug and alcohol possession on school grounds. So nobody really put any effort into dissuading the kids from having fun. Story 18. I got up one night to get some water and found that my teenage son was in the kitchen getting food. He was behind the kitchen counter, so I could only see him from the waist up. When he came around the corner into the hall, two things happened simultaneously. He noticed me, and his eyes grew wide in horror, and I saw that he was butt naked except for a pair of socks. He starts trying to panic run backwards on the tile floor. Imagine Scooby-Doo trying to run but getting stuck in place in a flurry of limbs, but ends up slipping and taking a hard seat on the tile. Worst of all, he dropped his hot pocket. I made sure he was okay, then went back to bed and laughed my butt off. Years later, we were driving and reminiscing about funny memories. I said, "Do you remember that night?" And he cut me off with, "Yes." I didn't even have to specify which night. We knew, and we were silent. Story 19. My husband and I work at the same small office. We were the first ones in that morning, and other employees usually don't show up for another hour or so. There's only one bathroom on our floor as it's a small business. Anyway, I had just had some habanero spicy thing the day before, and I was in for some punishment on this particular morning. I'm talking doubled over, clutching your stomach, your farts are fire punishment. I hear a knock on the bathroom door, and I assume it's my husband. "Hang on, I'm having habanero squirts. I'll be out as soon as I can." I groan out between awful spitting sounds. I hear a female voice awkwardly reply, "Oh, okay. So sorry, Stacy, for pulling you into my terrible morning."